Welcome to episode 1 of MattLees Gets Creative. I'm the aforementioned MattLees. I'm a musician, a podcaster, a broadcaster, and every episode I'm chatting with fellow creative types to see what makes us all tick. I spoke to actors, writers, musicians, producers, directors, screenwriters, game designers, professional wrestlers, master chefs, magicians, rock stars. You get the point. I hope you enjoy these conversations as much as I did. I spoke to some fascinating people. I cannot wait for you to hear our 10-episode first season starting right now. Please follow us at ML Gets Creative. That's Twitter and Instagram. You'll find us on YouTube and Facebook. You can email us MattLeesGetsCreative@gmail.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this brand new show, episode 1 of MattLees Gets Creative.
Hi, Matt. I was looking forward to talking to you.
I really get turned on by good ideas and good stories.
I've been cursed and blessed with an overactive imagination.
If people like it or whether they don't like it, no consequence to me. I prefer that they liked it. Even just saying that made the hairs on my arms stand up.
MattLees Gets Creative contains themes and subjects that may not be suitable for everyone listening. If you're easily offended, we suggest that you get your podcast on elsewhere.
This time on MattLees Gets Creative.
Well, anyone who is interested in living a creative life, I always say never, ever quit.
Beth Torbert was born in June of 1971 in New Delhi, India, but she would grow up in Winnipeg, Manitoba, where she quickly fell in love with all styles of music. Today, she's a cancer survivor, a motivational speaker, an actress, and an author who holds an honorary doctorate from the University of Fraser Valley in British Columbia. And in the late 90s and early 2000s, she was touring the United States, Canada, and Europe, sharing the bill with the likes of Billy Idol, the Foo Fighters, and Snoop Dogg. She was also releasing multiple top 20 tracks, including a rise to number 1 on the Canadian charts with Spaceman. Sound familiar? You may know her better by her stage name, Bif Naked. And I'm delighted to welcome her as my guest this week on episode 1 of MattLees Gets Creative.
Hi, Matt. I was looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, me too. It's really cool. Was really glad you agreed to do it because I was coming up in radio when your tunes were banging on the radio, so I have a real connection to a lot of the songs. So it's really cool to get to talk to you. Yeah, especially.
How did you wind up moving to the UK?
Well, I was born here originally. And then when I was really young, we moved to Canada, where I had my formative years and grew up, as it were. And then my wife and I now live back here in South Wales, right near Cardiff. So kind of a big round trip.
I played there before. Yeah, in Cardiff, we played there. Oh God, I don't remember when. It would have been 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I saw you live around that time too at some of the Warped Tour shows. So really cool.
Yeah.
And of course, awesome. You wouldn't remember we did once take a photograph together, and I wish it was a digital era because I could find that picture and use it for the interview. But of course, it was the era of cameras you buy at the gas station on the way to the gig on the weekend, So unfortunately, not.
Yeah, I used to have a collection of those disposable cameras that you're talking about, and I have thousands of 4x6 photos that I got developed.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and now it's so easy with digital.
Now it just fits on a phone. It's crazy. I wouldn't have believed it all those years ago.
No kidding. Me too.
So I noticed on your Instagram as well, at Bif Naked Official, you were playing with some Legos today, and that's something the wife and I love to do. I noticed you were repairing a Lego set.
Cool. Yeah, no, my husband collects Star Wars and Kiss. And of course, when Lego came out with their Millennium Falcon last year, which was the biggest Lego ever made at that time, well, naturally we had to line up every Wednesday for 2 months until he could finally get one for himself, and he dropped the guitar on it.
Oh.
Just week ago after building it the first time, which took a couple weeks for sure.
Yeah.
And so now he's building it again from scratch, but this time he has no map.
Oh dear, that's a tough one.
Well, he's got the patience for it, I guess. I don't know whether that's because he's a guitar player, but he's happy to just work on that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I wouldn't be able to do it. There's no way.
No, I kind of sit back and watch my wife build them, and then once they're done, I'm like, "Can I play with it?" And she says, "Leave it alone. You're gonna break it."
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Be careful.
Exactly. So, for your starting in music, of course, born in India and then growing up in Canada, what was the spark musically for you? Where did you fall in love with music?
I think that we, like every North American kid, my sisters and I just listened to the radio or whatever my parents would let us listen to. And I had no intention of being a musician by any means. I mean, I was a theater kid, and we were in performing arts festivals and doing ballet and stuff like that. I never thought I would be a musician. I don't know. I took piano lessons, but I just really wasn't into it, and I just kind of fell into a band when I was in college,
Mm-hmm.
and it was perfect. It just enabled me to do everything that I wanted to do, from finding a vehicle for my poetry writing, putting it into lyrics. As far as performing goes, it was like, especially in, punk music, anything goes. Like, it was just, you could do anything on stage. You could light yourself on fire. You could take a poop like Gigi Allen.
Yeah.
You could yell the F word. You could sing songs about the period. It was just, for me as a young person, it was everything I ever dreamed about being able to do as far as a way of expressing myself.
Yeah. It is a cool thing because, as you mentioned, those things, and I as I say, I went to many a Warped Tour, so just the things I saw from seeing one of those things a year. If you guys are touring on those things, you must have seen, pardon my French, you must have seen some shit on some of those shows.
Oh, sure, and I've always been such a huge fan of bands, and especially when I was young, there wasn't a lot of other girls that I saw touring. So a lot of my heroes were these really aggressive guy-fronted bands. And I knew that if I wanted to be, I guess, accepted by them, I had to be pretty tough. And I had to sing tough and behave tough. And yeah, it makes me laugh now.
Right.
I think it's a bit more feminine as I got older, but
right.
I wouldn't trade my history for anything.
No.
It was so fun.
Yeah, I'm sure we can all look back at things when we were younger and gone, "You silly, silly kid." But unbelievable experience. Now, were you always a rocker? Was that always your preference? Because I was always curious about Spaceman, a fantastic tune, but the techno remix, was that something at the time that you were like, I don't like this, or were you totally down to play with any sort of genre or style?
Oh, absolutely. And I was really lucky from my first record onward because there were so many different styles on the record. I guess like any kid, any Generation X kid, we loved all kinds of music, from Madonna to Culture Club,
Mm-hmm.
to the Ramones, to Metallica. I mean, the sky was the limit. And it was fun. Anyone who wanted to do a remix of my song was always able to do that. There were a couple like German industrial mixes of Lucky, and there were,
Yeah.
I mean, it was just anything goes. And I still feel that way today. For me, it's always a real honor to have anybody reimagine the song.
Yeah. Now, I was a musician myself when I was living in Canada. I still am, I suppose. But I always think of it from a technical standpoint. For that song, that remix of Spaceman, is that something that you would re-perform the vocals, or do they take the master from another time and play with it in that sense? Or is it always different? Is it not the same every time?
Oh, well, that particular remix was done by, I think, the Boomtang Boys. And yeah, they just took the the masters and remix them.
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays it's so easy to just email a vocal track to somebody or to just share your stems with them. It's just, the whole recording game has changed so much.
Yeah, I mean, the things I can do on an iPad here in my home studio that I needed to go to my school to do in the professional recording studios that I can do now on an iPad is, again, just unbelievable.
That's right.
We're sounding like old folks,
Yeah, it's
talking
wild.
about the old days. Back in my day, things weren't this easy, but
That's exactly right. It's the truth, though.
yeah, these kids these days don't know how easy they have it.
That's right. They have no idea.
Now, the concept for the podcast is obviously myself as a musician. I wanted to talk to other creative types and just sort of pick their brains, because I'm finding I've spoken to lots of different elements of creativity, all different kinds of people, writers and pro wrestlers and actors and things like that. And there's a recurring theme, which is the gift and curse of being a creative person that I think only us mutual people would understand. So for yourself, are there those? It's hard because you sound like if we talk that way, people who would look at us would go, "Oh, you've got this nice gift and you're complaining about it." And that's not it at all. But there are these hard parts about being creative as an individual as well. So is there some parts for you that were really difficult that way?
Well, to me, I find that like a lot of writers, I like kind of following the creative spurts that I have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have the self-discipline a lot of the time to sit down and just, write from 9 to 5 every day.
Right.
That's never going to be how I operate, even though, it may be really lucrative for some people to do things that way. I don't know any other life than this one. I've been, doing this as my job since I was, I don't know. I had a day job at one point. Let me just think. It was like I had to not work anymore in 1992 because touring just took over. And from that moment forward, I just lived hand to mouth, basically, like everybody else I knew that was in a project. And that's still how we live, and as much as it sounds daunting and it looks daunting on paper, to always be uncertain, you never have a steady paycheck, and some years are different than other years, and it's just, I think that we still, as a result of that, we don't create on the clock, and we don't create with money in mind.
Right.
We just keep writing songs, or in my case, short stories, poems, whatever, that maybe never see the light of day and never see a cent. And we just kind of somehow, still somehow manage to have a banana and some orange juice and put gas in the car.
Right.
And we just keep going. And it's just, it's a creative life. I would recommend it for everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, it's, that's a beautiful thing as well when, you've got gas in the car, you got the juice, you got the food. What else do you really need? Ultimately, you're living this life you enjoy. You're getting to create for a living, and almost the term for a living doesn't almost fit because it's much more personal than that, I think. Because I found the harder I pushed to become like, all right, that's it. We're going to start making money now in this band. I didn't enjoy it anymore.
Right.
It just kind of, for me, that kind of went downhill from there. And it became a job.
Right.
And then it became, I got to rehearse and I got to learn these 3 covers for this show tonight. And nobody really appreciates me anyway. And grumble. So it's, I always admire the artists and the musicians and the people that can stick at it. Because for me, it was the business side that I really didn't enjoy. The shaking hands and kissing babies, as I always call it, which I feel like it's something you also have to be good at. Or you have to have somebody close to you that's good at it. So was that you, or did you have sort of a wingman or a wing lady to handle the business side, especially when you were young and maybe not, if I may, maybe not as mature as you would become later?
Well, I have had the same manager since 1992.
There you go.
And so
that feels rare to me.
He's always just been my manager.
Yeah. And that sounds one. I mean, that sounds very rare. Would that be right to think that's a rare thing?
Oh, sure. A lot of people that I know have been through a lot of different managers in the trajectory of their career. And for me, it was just never the way. As I get older, I find that I want to take a management role with other artists and tour managing as well. I always did my own tour management, and now, of course, like to tour manage other bands. My husband being a guitar player and a luthier, for him and I to create a business.
Right.
He can stage manage and I can tour manage, and it's just there's I think just a wealth of education a person gets in the music industry, in every avenue and at every facet of the business. And I didn't like doing it when I was younger. I was really grateful to have always had my manager. And because of that, I think that, I know if I become a manager for an artist, I feel like I know what to do and what not to do.
Yeah. And it's got to be much more fruitful from a knowledge standpoint for these new artists to have somebody like yourself who's been through it rather than just a standard quote-unquote manager. There's that knowledge that you're going to have that nobody else can really get unless they've lived what you've lived through. Struggles as well as the positive things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a benefit to have been an artist for so long.
Yeah. Now with writing, and you said you kind of just follow the spurts, which is something very, very common as well, I think. Now, is there a process then? Is it like there's a specific drink, there's a specific candle, there's a specific room, or is it just kind of this is where I need to write right here, right now?
It really it changes time. I still have because of course when we started writing, we didn't have computers.
Right.
We just hang out. And so I still do things the same way. And I think about songwriting every day. I always have a song in my head that I'm working on, either that, Snake or Doug or Peter has, provided me with a body of music that I'm going to write lyrics to. Either that or we think of stuff for short stories and I always just write it in my book. And so wherever I go, my books come with me in a big, heavy bag.
Right.
And then I write wherever I find myself half the time.
Yeah. It's like you were saying, it's very freeing, but also, very, very intimidating or scary sometimes because people may not understand that, like you were saying, the steady paycheck, but it's not also necessarily a steady stream of ideas. So do you hit those down periods where you're like, oh, I haven't written anything for like hours or days, and then you kind of worry, and because back of some artist's mind, it may always be that, oh, that could have been the last one, that could have been the last good idea. And you always have to.
Right. I've never thought that.
Good. That's a good way to look at it.
I've never thought that, actually.
Well, please don't ever,
I never had writer's block. I don't know.
Yeah. Because some people say writer's block would be a myth, so it's really, but you do have those patches then where nothing new is coming out. In those times, what would you be doing? Do you play guitar? You play bass as well. Is there times where you just kind of noodle with the instrument and it comes musically, or are you always lyrics first?
I am just like really focused on the lyrics, the melody, and we oscillate between keyboards and acoustic guitar for writing. And sometimes, like you were mentioning, GarageBand and stuff like that, you can get lost in a program like GarageBand and make drum loops and instrument loops, for hours and hours.
Yeah, it's wild.
So it really, really depends. There's a million ways to write a song, and you never really run out of opportunities to work on something, even if it's something new. I find the same is true for book writing and whatnot. You have to have a couple of different things on the go because you go down a rabbit hole of creativity on one project, and if you get stumped or if it gets boring or if you feel like, I don't know where this pre-chorus is going, then you can put it down and work on something else you've been working on. So
yeah.
I always believe in multiple projects.
Yeah, and that's a good way to look at it, because then you're not just shutting the doors, you're not shutting everything down. You just move on to something else for a while and pick up on the first project a little bit later. I think that's a good way, really
That's
cool way
right.
to look at it. And it also, I think the entire lifestyle you live shows a resiliency and an ability to push through and fight. Now, you and I can go as in-depth on this as you like or as little as you like, but you and I are both fellow cancer survivors. That's something.
Oh, wow.
Hey folks, thanks for listening to MattLees Gets Creative. Now, I know people can't afford to be a patron for each of the podcasts that they love, but if you're looking to put a little support towards an independent podcast, it would make you a loyal part of our team. Those fees would be used for the obvious things like the production of the episodes, but we're also looking to pay it forward, as each month I'll donate half of the total patron subscriptions to the Valindra Cancer Center in Cardiff. Because, in addition to being a musician and a podcaster, I am also a cancer survivor. As well as bonus clips and outtakes from various interviews, patrons would also have access to live streams and at least one exclusive episode per month. Bonus episodes could be additional interviews or unheard guests, as well as performances and readings by musicians, poets, authors, etc. Loyal supporters would also get some digital earlove with shoutouts on these special shows. As a member of the club, you'll also have spoiler alert access, where you'll find out about an upcoming guest, have the chance to submit questions, and even have early access to some of those episodes. This show will always remain free for all of the people that are kind enough to listen and to join us on our journey. But if you're looking to give a little back and help us out too, you are most welcome, and we would appreciate your support. And that's at patron.podbean.com/MattLees Gets Creative. patron.podbean.com/MattLees Gets Creative. Thanks for listening. You and I are both fellow cancer survivors.
When did you have cancer treatment?
Yourself was January 2008. Is that right? For yourself when you were diagnosed? Because I was.
Oh, yes, it was.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was 2017 January. So.
Wow.
Very quick turnaround from, not feeling right, not looking right, to finding them. Testicular cancer was the end result. So, of course, the surgery first, followed by the chemotherapy. And it's a wild experience. I know that sounds like a lighthearted way to explain it, but I think maybe you may...
No, not at all. It sounds accurate to me.
Yeah, because you catch yourself in the mirror one day and you're like, oh man, this is actually happening to me, not somebody else. Like, we actually have this thing and we're actually having chemo right now. So I'm sure for you quite a few years ago, for me more recent. But I bet it's still something that, you always think about, because it really changes the outlook on your life, doesn't it?
Well, I started volunteering when I was in breast cancer treatment, and I did peer support for other patients, and that kind of segued into palliative care volunteering, which is my passion.
Yeah.
And I find that now I'm actually trying to finish writing this book on breast cancer. I get really bogged down in the scientific details because it's always changing and evolving. It's fascinating to me. I loved being in treatment. I was so happy that it was me and not my mother or not my sister.
Right.
I felt like I was tough as nails and I would take one for the team.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And I felt like statistically, if 1 out of 8 girls that I know, if 1 out of 8 girls that I know is going to get tit cancer, let it be me.
Yeah.
Because they have kids or they have full-time jobs or, whatever the case. And I just thought, let me do it.
Yeah.
I work from home, basically. I can do this. And the treatment variables were really interesting to me. I don't know how your chemo went or what drugs that they gave you, or I'm not that familiar with the protocol for testicular cancer, but I find it very interesting that you had chemotherapy for. I'm hugely curious what drugs you had to take.
Yeah, it's one of those...
I'm writing a chapter right now all about drugs.
Yeah, well, to give you specifics, I'll have to follow up with you, later, and I can give you actual, but it was many different kinds. It was the multiples a day, so you would kind of do the flush and then the chemo. They came in the black bag because they can't be exposed to sunlight,
I see.
It was these guys. So the specific names is sort of, block. But there's quite a few of them, and then of course the 14 or 15 tablets a day that you're taking to counteract everything else going on. So for my,
I see.
Yeah, and it was 3 rounds of chemo for myself, 3 rounds, but that obviously they spread that out over a number of weeks because of the impact it has
of course.
on you. So you take a few weeks off in between. But
I see.
But it's funny you say it that way, because I also kind of had the vibe of when people speak to me now about it, and I say, "Oh, it wasn't so bad." They say, "Oh, it must have been awful." I'm like, "No, it wasn't so bad." And I'm glad that you sort of said the same thing, as well as when I looked at my family and friends, I was like, "No, it's cool. Let me take this. I'll do it. I'll take this one. I'm glad it was me and not any of you guys. So I got this. I'm gonna watch stuff on my iPad while they jab me with these needles, and you guys get on with your lives."
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, it's very different than what we were brought up thinking chemo would look like for people. And we just, I think most families or patients who've never had anyone in their family or anyone that they know experience cancer treatment always think, because we have no frame of reference, all we think is that it makes you lie down on the floor of your bathroom and pooping yourself and puking.
Right.
And so everyone's afraid of that. Everyone's afraid of feeling sick like that. Everyone is afraid of being debilitated. But, I think that what a lot of people don't realize is that when a person, any person with any job is in cancer treatment, they still have to go to work half the time. They still have 4 kids, or they still have to take the bus to chemo. It's not, no one really has the luxury of being able to just, have naps and watch The Simpsons all day long. Most people really still have to go to work, whether they feel good or not. And it's, that's a reality for a lot of people in the world. And I mean, with the UK, with Canada, mostly our health care is provided.
Oh yeah, and that's something you cannot. That's something you can't explain enough how grateful you are for it, because if that would have happened to me in America, for example, not taking shots, I have lots of American friends, but what I mean is, if that happened in a country like that, my parents would have probably had to mortgage their house in order to get my treatment.
Absolutely.
If that would even cover it. If that would even cover it,
If they could, exactly. And there's, but even here in Canada, there's so many communities that are quite remote, fly-in communities in northern Manitoba, northern Saskatchewan, even northern Ontario, where women don't have access to mammograms. They don't have access to nurse practitioners. I mean, one thing about being immersed in cancer care is I started learning about just a lot of different things regarding the healthcare system in general. And again, it was hugely interesting for me, just almost like in a public health way, in a socialistic, socially conscious way. To get that firsthand education was enormously beneficial. And I feel like now when I do any public speaking, when it comes to healthcare, I'm so happy that I was a patient, because I feel like I can speak to the causes that I'm trying to advocate for, and be a better patient advocate because I was a patient myself.
Yeah. And I think for me, it was an education in kindness. That sounds kind of cheesy, but, I pride myself in being a quote unquote grumpy old man, but I met so many nurses and doctors that they basically, their goal, their whole life, like for yourself, be a rock star. For myself, be a radio star, For these people, it was, I want to help people. I want to take care of people. I want to save people's lives. And that kind of reminded me, when you meet people that will sacrifice like that for me, You know, and you think, just for little old me, really? You went to school and did all that just for little old me? And, you know, for you to mention yourself then that you then transition that, you know, for yourself volunteering and going into care like that, that must be great for them as well. It's, I think similar to like we said about when you talk to new musicians, because you've had the experience. I think it would be the same if you spoke to a patient. You know, it's one thing for a doctor to tell you, you're going to be fine. We're going to do this and that. We're going to cut that off. We're going to snip this and give you some of this. You'll be great. But when I spoke to other patients, it was, hey, man, you're going to feel awful. You're going to lose your hair. Sometimes you're going to cry. Sometimes you're going to yell. Sometimes you're going to give you cool drugs, and you'll be okay with that, you know, because it's more real. It's more tangible because they've lived it as well.
Absolutely.
So it's, you know, I get guys, you know, I work in just a regular old place here, a regular old factory here, but I get guys coming up to me now, and they'll be like, I found a lump. What do you think I should do? Amazing. And I'm like, well, dude, you should go to the doctor, right? Like, I'm glad you came and told me, but you should go to the doctor. Yeah. And it's cool that people will do that because I tell them, you know, early detection is the magic word because you just got to keep the fight ahead. I mean, I remember a time where you couldn't go anywhere without seeing the Ibificus cover as a poster.
Oh, goody.
Or as an album. Or as a, you know, it's just... I just remember that, and for myself specifically, I Love Myself Today, I remember loving that tune when I was getting into radio because it was a great song to intro over. I don't know if musicians ever hated when like DJs would talk over the start of their song, but it was just one of those tunes where it riled you up. It was great to hit the vocals on. It was a really cool tune to intro. So, you know, there's the big part where you couldn't go very far without hearing a Bif Naked tune.
That's fantastic. And hopefully with the new record we're making right now, hopefully everyone will feel that way again.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Hotbox Girls, that's the tune that was sent over to me as well. And obviously, what a tune. You know, rocky right out of the gate. Because these days there's a lot of different styles of music, right? And I always tell people, anyone who will listen, that nobody really plays the guitar anymore. Nobody just plays in a rock band anymore. Or you don't hear it, especially in the UK radio. You just don't hear a rock and roll band anymore. There's always a kick beat or a hi-hat, you know, which is fine if that's the taste. But sometimes you just want to hear a rock tune. So that specifically is a great tune and a great return to the stuff that I remember when I was playing I Love Myself Today when I was doing high school radio back in the 90s in Kitchener, Ontario. So
wonderful.
A really cool experience for that.
That's great. Yeah, we found that. That single was out last. I guess it would be last June, right. And then the stuff that we're writing now for the upcoming releases. I don't know. I think that it's really some of the best stuff that I think I've ever written before, and I just can't wait until we can start putting it out and promoting it and stuff. I'll make sure that Eric gets it to you right away.
Definitely. I mean, and that must be wild. You know, we've scheduled for 30 minutes. We're at 30 minutes. So I'm happy to wind down unless you're happy to keep talking for a few moments.
Certainly.
Cool. What I was going to ask was, we've talked a little bit about back in my day, but specifically from preparing an album and getting ready to release it. How much has that experience changed? Because, of course, you don't have to travel to a studio anymore, like we talked about with GarageBand and everything. So is that how these new demos that are going to be the upcoming releases have started? You're just kind of playing them around on the GarageBand and then transition them into a live band? Is that sort of how you've worked on it?
No, we have... So the stuff that we utilize in the studio, obviously, you know, now you can have an SSL board in your computer.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to go to find it anymore. And thanks to, we work very closely with a company called HHP Canada. And so they help us with new technology and recording technologies like, for example, universal audio and stuff like this. And it's just, you know, the sky is the limit as far as, you know, how we can write and do pre-production. Now it's just limitless. You know, the available sounds and effects that we have. And then by the time we're ready to do vocals and get a real drum kit on there and go through real amps, you know, we've done all the groundwork. So it is so much easier for us to record and do pre-production and even write. You know, we can add or subtract different elements in a song. We can speed it up and slow it down without having to relearn it, basically. And as far as getting the album ready to roll, you know, things are so different in the world now. You know, you've got bands like Nine Inch Nails. They toured on an EP 2 years ago. Bands can kind of do anything they want. You know, they just can release a single and then, you know, go out there and tour to support that song. Radio has changed so much, and rock radio particularly is on the decline as far as numbers of stations. You know, when you've got, for example, Foo Fighters or Pearl Jam, some of these bands that are now on classic rock radio.
Oh, I know.
I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow.
It's hurtful.
Yeah, we're kids from the 90s, so we're like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
You know, classic rock is Uriah Heep. It's, you know, I don't know. It's Blue Oyster Cult. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But honestly, to get on rock radio now is it's a really different. It's a different genre. Unless you're going to be trying to do the Sirius XM type of stuff or Octane on Sirius, there aren't a lot of radio stations that are going to play heavy rock anymore.
No.
You kind of, you know, so it forces a young band, particularly, or a new band, to really try and make their own way through the internet, really and truly, and hope that people will click on their SoundCloud link, and people still use, you know, little indie band pages and stuff to get their music out there. And you know that if you make a song that people are going to want to hear, they will find it.
That's right. The cream will rise to the top. You know, it
always does.
Now, so with the internet making it so easy, there's a lot more stuff out there. But again, the good stuff will always get ears. So it must be an exciting time, but also a challenging time. You know. But do you still love all the aspects of it? Do you still love touring? Do you still love all of it? Is there any of it that you're like, oh, that's one part, if I could tweak, I would? Or is it you still love all of it?
I love touring. I've always loved touring. I love my band. And, you know, it's like, I don't know, I would just do it for a sandwich a day because we just have so much fun. It's just like hanging out with all my best friends, and we get to put a show at the end of the day every day.
Yeah.
So I still have never lost that, you know, ever.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's good or bad, but I find that you know, for a little while it was difficult when I came out of cancer treatment. I think for me, having to had done I did the usual 6 months of chemo every other girl did. Right. And then I did Herceptin for another 11 months afterward, and the radiation. And then after that, I had another surgery where they took my ovaries out, which was fine. I mean, chemotherapy puts a girl in menopause anyway. But I just found as I tried to recover, and you may know this from experience as well, it really took a really, really long time. Even though I felt good, I felt better, I felt recovered, I really wasn't recovered, you know, and this was like 5 years in, and I was still on tour, and I didn't understand why, you know, I kept choking. Every time I jumped up and down on stage, I felt like I was choking. And it turned out that the surgical port that I had implanted in my chest, I had a blood clot. And I wound up having a heart surgery in 2012, and my kidney failed, and it was just never-ending residual after effects, possibly from the cancer treatments themselves, and possibly because it would have happened anyway. But the only aspect of touring that was hard at that point was that I felt physically really vulnerable for a long time. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago, you know, that I felt like my old bare knuckle fighting self,
Yeah.
and able to withstand the mosh pits and the folly of my youth.
Yeah. Well,
And now I just feel invincible again. And it took a long time to get there.
yeah. Well, I'm relieved to hear you say that because, again, I'm only a few years removed, and I'm definitely still not 100%, which is hard to explain to people because you feel good, you feel normal, but you don't, and you still have those. So it's relieving to hear that it's going to take a few more years. That's all, because both mentally and physically.
It's unpredictable too.
Yeah,
It's hard to tell. I mean, I had migraines for 2 years, never having migraines before. And I just thought it was probably from getting older, or it could have been from, I don't know, hormone changes due to not having ovaries or environmental stuff. But really, it was probably just simple residual chemo after effects or radiation after effects.
Yeah.
And you don't know. And you don't know how your body's going to react. And but it's interesting, and I love it all. I would do it all again tomorrow. and I always say, for every woman who's afraid to do chemo, I wish I could be her surrogate and do it for her.
Yeah.
Because it's a valid fear that people have, and they're terrified. Even though I wasn't, or you weren't, people really are terrified of doing treatment. And I don't know, it's a good skill to have.
Yeah, it's
great
sounds,
skill to have,
yeah,
especially if you survive.
Yeah, it sounds wild to say that, like, you weren't scared. It sounds, because I said the same thing, and I would say the same thing, and I don't think you or I mean that from a cocky, bragging standpoint. But yeah, I had moments where I was really scared. Of course, I did. But from an overall aspect, no part of me was ever like, I'm not going to win this battle. That never crossed my mind. So I was just like, oh, chemo, sounds good, no problem. Surgery, okay, yep, no problem. I never had that thing of like,
same here.
Of course I had moments of like, well, I don't want to do that, but.
Right, sure.
It was the strength, and it's insane because you were saying about these drugs are so strange. I had a gentleman sitting next to me in the bed, also receiving treatment at the same time, same age as me, same treatments, everything the exact same. But during our treatment, he ended up with a blood clot on his brain. He ended up taking multiple affections and staying in the hospital for multiple weeks. And now these years later, he is back into the hospital being diagnosed with leukemia, which they believe is caused by the chemo treatment itself.
Yes.
As much as I've been through, I also have to try to feel blessed in as much as, and I think blessed is the wrong sentiment. That's not how I mean to express it. But, we were feet away from each other, receiving all the same treatment. I had my journey and he had his. So I can't look back at it too negatively, because in the grand scheme of things, I got off easy and I had a real easy ride, So there's so many other people out there going through it all the time. So that's always what I try to tell people is just keep up the fight, and final thoughts would be, what advice do you give? I know it's a cheesy question, but it sounds great in sound clips. What advice would you give to budding artists, musicians out there right now that are just thinking they might want to maybe get into music or writing or poetry?
Well, anyone who is interested in living a creative life, I always say never, ever quit. Never quit trying and never give up, because, the world is full of bands, it's full of musicians, it's full of writers, and there's room for everybody. And whatever you're writing, whatever you're making, somebody's going to love it. You're going to find fans, and you deserve to be heard. So keep going.
I want to thank you so much for being willing to do this and to chat with me, take time out of your Lego building.
Oh, it's been so great. I appreciate that you called me, Matt.
Next time on MattLees Gets Creative.
Even though I went to the art school and I was flourishing there and I was doing some nice roles, really kind of discovering myself, I never intended on pursuing acting as a career until actually my drama teacher overheard that I hadn't applied to any theater schools for post-secondary. And I said to her, well, I people don't make a living at that. And she's like, you could.
Nicholas Corella is a writer, producer, director, and an actor you may have seen in such projects as Bates Motel, Designated Survivor, iZombie, The Good Doctor, and Supernatural. He's my guest next week for an awesome chat about growing up an 80s kid, his start in acting, his love for storytelling, and much more. So don't forget to follow us on social media so you never miss an episode. ML Gets Creative on Twitter and Instagram. We're also on Facebook and YouTube. And if you enjoy the show, please subscribe, tell your friends, and perhaps consider giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really does help. Thanks for listening. I'm MattLees, and we'll see you next time we get creative.